So what are the forces that are taking value away from the assets you own? So previous to 2008, this was quite simple to calculate with a high degree of confidence. Say you are realizing a gain from an investment you made in 1999 and you sell it in 2006. At this time, you would simply calculate the internal rate of return and then subtract 2% per year to understand what your average inflation-adjusted return was over that 7-year period. But that is no longer sufficient because between 2008 and today, the M1 money supply has gone up 1,379%. In 2008, the M1 supply was about 1.4 trillion, and as of December 2023, the M1 money supply sits at around 20.7 trillion, a 15x increase, okay? A 15 times increase. But there's a subtle difference between how this increase in money supply and the way it's deployed in the economy via the Fed affects asset values and is not as simple as how we traditionally understand inflation. Because of how the Fed prints dollars, it creates with the US Treasury. So this is where inflation becomes easily confused with debasement. Inflation, remember, relates to your purchasing power for goods and services going down. So it has to do with like your ability to consume in the economy. While the debasement of a currency relates to reducing its underlying value. It is easy to understand in the context of coinage, right? When one reduces the amount of precious metal in, say, a silver coin by cutting it down with cheaper metals while keeping the face value constant, that's what the debasement is. But what the Fed and the US Treasury are doing is they are leveraging paper dollar-backed treasuries to create more dollars, and then they invest those dollars back into treasuries. This is a more disturbing and more risky situation than what the Roman emperors were doing by cutting down the silver contents of a coin, right? So what does this all mean? Well, it means that when you are investing today and your asset isn't going up more than 8 to 8.5% per year, then you are actually losing money because asset values are debasing at that rate. And there is no escaping this because the value of nearly every asset on Earth is denominated in dollars. So you are in the red until you get above that 8%. This is why commercial real estate is so scary right now. Because with this 8% annual debasement, plus whatever your existing debt costs are, say at 6%, you need an IRR above 14% to get back to zero, right? So meaning a 15% IRR on paper is now in real terms, a 1% IRR for, say, a commercial real estate asset, especially in the context of office spaces in blue states where leases have become less reliable and accessible. But there are some great takeaways here. Or to put it another way, some great probabilistic assumptions we can build on top of with a great deal of confidence. So, assumption 1 is that the government can print its own currency to pay off its debts. We know that, and it has developed a clear preference for doing so opposed to other methods that are available to them. Okay? Assumption 2 is that the GDP will continue to grow below 3.5% to 4%. And we can be relatively certain that we will not go above 3.5% to 4% in terms of GDP growth because really it won't happen until the baby boomers die, let's just be honest. So we can fairly assume that the Fed will continue to pay down the debts of the US Treasury while covering their expenses. This way, covering their expenses this way by this Ponzi scheme that I'm describing effectively, until we experience extreme economic growth. And we will define extreme economic growth for the purposes of this video to be a GDP rate above 4%. So they have to basically, to sum that up, in order for them, the federal government, to continue to pay for its expenses with the current economic growth we have, they have to continue to enlist this strategy until we have extreme economic growth, which is possible for the US government to achieve. But it's very unlikely because it'll happen 8 to 10 years from now when AI, robotics, and their essential infrastructure is widely set up for commercial and consumer products. But that all assumes that we are competent enough to double our total electricity production over that time period, which in my opinion is highly, highly debatable.